Another story that we are tracking for you this morning, the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa is leading a consultation with civil society at the Johannesburg City Hall today. The consultation is meant to get the governing party to be in touch with issues on the ground. SABC News political reporter Samkele Maseko and video journalist Sandile Mchunu are there for us this morning. Sam, a very good morning to you. Thanks indeed for your time. So let's look at what some of these broad socio-economic issues that might come up from those consultations at the Johannesburg City Hall this morning.
Well, Criselda, the ANC is effectively getting into electioneering mode by having this engagement with civil society unions. We know that Fedusa is also here and other members of civil society within South Africa in order to interact with society, speak about the future that the governing party wants to build, especially knowing that on Monday there is that planned national shutdown by the EFF to shut down the economy of the country, saying it will start on Sunday at midnight on the 20th of March going forward. But I'm going to bring in Mr. Ntuli just to essentially react on the issues pertaining to why the ANC decided to engage on this engagement this morning. Mr. Ntuli, why did you deem it important to have this gathering of this nature with civil society this morning, particularly knowing that you are going towards an election?
Well, thanks, Samkele. Good morning to you and good morning to the viewers at home. You know, when we went to the 55th National Conference of the ANC, there was an extensive discussion about the need for the ANC to reconnect with civil society formations, because historically the ANC has been defined as a leader of society on the basis of its strength and ability to mobilize and coordinate society across the spectrum and beyond political formations around a common program of action, a common agenda, and a common tasks to rebuild and the reconstruction of our country. So we decided today that let's have this multi-sectoral engagement. Here you would notice that there are people who are coming from all walks of lives, from the youth formations, from various trade union movements, not just within COSATU, but other formations as well, and from different sectors of society. The purpose of today's engagement is for the ANC to report back on them, on the outcomes of the 55th National Conference of the ANC, but equally to gain an insight, to understand from them what contribution are they geared up to make as part of resolving the many challenges that our country is facing, which can be defined in a summarized way as the triple challenges of poverty, inequality and unemployment. So the ANC is not coming here to tell the civil society formations what needs to be done, but equally to learn. And not just to learn, to also engage them to become active participants, because the reason why we were able to achieve our democracy in 1994 was not because of the ANC alone, was because of the ANC's capability to organize and mobilize a multifaceted effort throughout our population to ensure that we achieve the 1994 breakthrough.
One of the main issues facing civil society and facing South Africa at large today is the prospects of the economic freedom fighters shutting down the economy on Monday. The president of the country has reiterated that the rights of civilians will not be hampered by any individuals. The security cluster has already been oiled up. If these civil society organizations bring up that point of that national shutdown of the opposition, the economic freedom fighters, what is the ANC stance, particularly knowing what may transpire on Monday? What's your view of the national shutdown planned by the economic freedom fighters and that interdict that has now been granted by the High Court, saying that the EFF cannot go on any criminal activity, cannot shut down any institutions?
I think it's important to reassert our constitutional values, that we are a law-abiding citizen. We live in a constitutional democracy. Everybody has a right and are entitled to express their opinion in one form or another if they are not happy about things that are happening in our country. But that has to happen within a dignified and within the type of a law-governing society that we live in. As the ANC, we are not very much worried about what is going to happen on Monday. What happened on Monday would be an event of that particular day. The ANC as a governing party as well has a responsibility at the level of government to ensure that the ANC-led government does everything that is possible and within its own powers to ensure that there is no violation of our constitution with whatever protest and demonstrations that are going to happen on Monday. And the assurance that was given by the justice and the cluster that deals with security in our country is very reassuring. And as the African National Congress, we call upon all South Africans, including those that may decide to join the protest on Monday, if they do so, to do so in a dignified manner and in a manner that respects the rights and the constitutional rights of all other South Africans who may decide not to join that occasion. But you see, Samkele, that what the central challenge that we face is not to go to the street and demonstrate. What we are faced with is a major challenge of an economy that is not working for the majority. The conversation we are going to have today is, in our own view, the most appropriate kind of intervention that is required, where people from different walks of life are coming in to share their own ideas, and not only to express their own ideas, but also to make a commitment on the contribution that each one is going to make, coming from different organizations, in order to respond to the central challenge that's facing our people today. So we're not very worried as the African National Congress that there will be a march on Monday or there will be a protest. All we would want to see happening is that those who are taking to various parts of our country or to the streets should do so in a manner that does not violate the constitutional right of those who would have decided not to be part of that occasion.
Mr. Ntuli, on geopolitics, the International Criminal Court has ordered for the arrest of Russian President Vladimir Putin. In South Africa, the ICC had sent out that directive to arrest former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. He was whisked out of the country. South Africa is the chair of BRICS this year. Could we see South Africa once again violating the statute of the International Criminal Court by refusing to arrest President Vladimir Putin, knowing South Africa's allegiance to Russia?
You see, the approach of the ICC is not, in my own view and in the view of the ANC, it's not something that is really going to solve the problem that is confronting the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That conflict is much more larger than a warrant of arrest issued against President Putin. The conversation that is taking on in the United Nations, in the African Union, in bilateral that are taking place between South Africa as a country and the rest of the progressive forces in the world to find a lasting solution to the Russia-Ukraine crisis is much more better than issuing a warrant of arrest for President Putin to be arrested. I don't think that that is actually the solution. I mean, we solve our own problem in this country not on the basis of people being arrested, but on the basis of understanding that we share a common a destiny as a people and as Africans in our context, and we had to work together to find a solution to the problems that are confronting South Africa. I think that it's ill-advised. It's ill-advised for the ICC to issue that warrant of arrest against President Putin. It's deepening the crisis rather than supporting the United Nations effort to ensure that a solution must be found to the problem that is taking place between Russia and Ukraine.
Lastly, Mr. Ntuli, what can you anticipate that the President of the African National Congress will say once he rounds up this particular roundtable? You will be chairing the discussion on the future that we seek to build as the African National Congress. What were some of the inputs that we may anticipate from that commission that you will be chairing, and also from the roundup of the inputs from your President?
The fundamental task is that when we emerge from this dialogue today, each of the sectors that will be participating must leave here not only having made suggestions about how to resolve the many challenges that are confronting our people in South Africa, but equally having made an undertaking that we ourselves as a sector would make the following contributions, and this is what we are also prepared to sacrifice in order to ensure that we succeed in our effort of the overall reconstruction and development of our country. Because what we are about here, we're about a conversation that must help us to respond to the myriad of problems that we're facing around the economy, around energy, around social cohesion. How do we respond to the gender-based violence that is taking place in our country? How do we respond to this state of lawlessness? We can't leave that task only to the police and law enforcement agencies. What are we doing as citizens? And how do we cultivate active citizenry that is going to be in charge of what is happening in their own neighborhood and different parts of our country and in different across communities and across all the racial groups within our country. So that's the kind of a conversation that we're expecting. It's not one of those occasions where you have a discussion, you go home without a responsibility. The last session that is going to be talking about the future from here is a commitment that each one of us must make. The ANC and the rest of the civil society formations, from which the ANC as a coordinator of this platform and a leader beyond even this platform, will have to ensure that we achieve those objectives that we have set for ourselves.
Lastly, you're speaking about energy. The energy availability factor, EAF, in 6 coal-powered stations has increased to 70%, which is a point that the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe, has been trying to drum across to Eskom. Is Mr. Mantashe vindicated knowing that the energy availability factor has increased to 70% in 6 coal-powered stations? Load shedding in some instances has been removed for this weekend, and in other instances reduced to level 1, stage 1 and stage 2.
Look, it's not even just about the Minister Mantashe being vindicated. It's more about the ANC being vindicated, in a sense that our position, including before and at the conference itself, we've been arguing that there's a great deal of weaknesses with regard to the maintenance of our power station. The leadership that should be exercised at that level of the administration, at that level of each and every power station for that matter, the role of a foreman and everybody else who are involved there, has been severely weakened. And when we met in the Lekgotla, we identified those factors, of course, led by the presentation made by the national chairperson of the ANC in his capacity as a Minister of Minerals and Energy and Minerals. So I'm quite certain that what we decided in January is now bearing fruits, in a sense that we were very particular about what needs to be done in each and every power station. We identify all of them that were performing before 50%. We said we need to answer the question, what's the nature of the problem? What is making this and that power station fail to live up to its own potential? And that work has to be done. Now that we have a very energetic Minister of Electricity, and the situation is equally improving, even ahead of him effectively assuming the reins and getting his hands dirty to deal with the problem on the ground, I think it communicates a positive message to South Africans that we know what we're doing, we understand the nature of the problem, and we are now responding to that problem in a manner that is consistent with the commitment that we made to South Africans, that we have a contract with them as the African National Congress, and we are by no way going to violate that contract by our failure, consciously or unconsciously, to respond to the national challenges that we're facing.
So in essence, you are saying Mr. Mantashe must get his flowers for the energy availability factor.
It's not just about him getting his flowers, but I think his diagnosis of the nature of the problem was quite correct. And the presentation I'm saying he made in the NEC Lekgotla, which was overwhelmingly adopted from conference to the Lekgotla, is now paying off. And I think all of us as South Africans should be proud of the fact that you have a minister of a governing party that was able to properly diagnose the nature of the problem, acted on that problem for us to see the positive results that we're seeing today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ntuli. That is Mr. Mtumseni Ntuli, the ANC's head of elections, speaking about a myriad of issues, particularly their engagement here with civil society, the interdict that was granted by the High Court to the Democratic Alliance, preventing the EFF of shutting down any institutions or any illegal criminality that may take place in the national shutdown on Monday, and also the International Criminal Court issuing out that warrant of arrest for Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is scheduled to arrive in South Africa for the BRICS summit later on this year, with South Africa chairing BRICS this year, which may place South Africa in another conundrum that the nation found itself with Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir.
Samkele, indeed, thank you very much, covering most of what is our breaking news story, including, of course, the High Court in Johannesburg here dismissing the DA's application to have Monday's EFF shutdown declared unlawful, similar to what we saw in a ruling in Cape Town. Of course, the shutdown then, of course, continues, but part, of course, of that ruling basically saying that there shouldn't be any illegal activity, there shouldn't be any intimidation or any of that sort taking place at these marches. The EFF, you would recall earlier this week, the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF indicating through a press conference, a number of journalists, including here at the SABC, that attended, saying that their aim is not to go out and cause a chaos, but to make a statement on a number of issues that are affecting the country.